Welcome back, Year 10s. This is Mrs. Janacek, and I'm going to help you go through this first worked example, and then you're going to do worked example 2 on your own. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to write a description of how you do it, probably more for yourself than for anybody else, but we're going to write this so that later on, when we go to revise, we can see how we go through one of these problems. So to do this, we're going to use this tool called a priority chart. So if you just click on this link above, it'll open up a priority chart for you. And I'm just going to put it right next to my example so I can see what I'm doing. So it makes it really easy to do this as I look at the problem. So let's have a look at worked example 1. Worked example 1 says, find the site labelled R. So we know that R is the hypotenuse because it's the longest side of this right angled triangle. Now, what we're trying to do in this activity is we want to explain what they've done here. They've already worked out the answer, so we already know what the answer is. We just have to figure out whether or not we know how to do that. So let's have a look. Here it's got tk squared with a little line above it. That little line above it means exactly that, line tk. So here is line or side, sorry, side tk. So this is saying to me, in that language of mathematics, side tk squared. So if I find this side and square it, it is equal to side tr squared. So side tr squared, that'll be 8 squared as you can see a little bit later on, plus side rk squared. So down here, there's r, there's k, so this is side rk, so plus it. So what's the very first thing I have to do when I do one of these problems? What have they done? They've written down Pythagoras' theorem, but they've written it in respect to this question. So let's just pop back up here on OneNote and I'll show you where that was. So back up here, it tells you that the hypotenuse squared is equal to side squared plus side squared. Now before I go any further, I'm just going to quickly go over here and in my own OneNote, I'm going to open up a new page and I'm going to write a spelling list because I already know that as we go through, I can see lots of really hard words that I'm not going to know how to spell, and I'm going to need to know how to spell. So I'm going to write them in as I go. So Pythagoras' theorem is the first one I need to know how to spell, and then I saw another complex word that I'm likely going to forget, hypotenuse, so I can add them in as I go. Let's go back to the lesson. So it tells me here hypotenuse squared equals side squared plus side squared. So if I go back down, first thing I need to do is write, we better give him a capital because Pythagoras was a great man, deserves a capital. Oops. Write Pythagoras' theorem in the context, now that's a hard word, of the question. So that means I don't just write that hypotenuse squared equals side squared plus side squared, or before today you might have seen, I don't know if I can do a little squared on here, a squared, I don't think I can. So you might have seen, I'll write it in Word so you can see it. So you may have seen a squared, oops, it's a lowercase a, plus b squared equals c squared. I'm sure you've all seen that before. Now I'll pop back into my product. I wonder if it'll let me paste that in. No, I'm gonna, oh no, I don't want it like that because that big 2 doesn't mean the same as squared, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm just going to write Pythagoras' theorem in the context of the question, which means I don't want it in this form. I want to put it in the context of what the question is telling me. The question is telling me that a squared is tr squared. It's telling me that b squared is rk squared. And it's telling me that c squared is tk squared. So I want to write it as it applies to this question. So once we've done that, what did they do? Next, they've substituted in what they know. We know on this question that c squared, or our hypotenuse, is r squared. They've labelled it. They've given it a name. So they're not just calling it side tk anymore. They're calling it, it's r centimetres long. So they've given it an actual value. We know that a squared is 8 squared. We know that b squared is 11 centimetres squared. So they've substituted in. So let's go back, and we better put step 2 in then, which would be substitute in values. We'll even put in there for a, b, and that's not and c. So now we've done 2 steps. Let's have a look at the third one. Now they've actually, how have they gotten from 8 squared to 64? Oh look, 8 squared is the same as 8 times 8, and 8 times 8 is 64. Here they've done 11 times 11, which is the same as 11 squared. 11 times 11 is 121. So they've actually gone and worked out what they could here. Alright? The language of maths is just like English. It's just like a sentence. You read your sentences from left to right. Same with maths. We read it from left to right down the page. So I'm reading from here all the way, and that line and then that one, to the end of what is, I suppose, a paragraph. So my third step is I'm going to write out, work out what I can. Now, that might not be clear to somebody else that reads that, so I'm going to say, e.g., if I can work out an answer, I should do that now. And for this one, I'm going to put 8 times 8 equals 64. So it's saying solve what you can and put it in, and you're telling the reader that that's what you've done. So now what do? I look at that and I go, well, I can add 64 and 121. I learnt to do that in grade 3. So I'm going to actually add those together, and we're going to get 105. So, 185. Now I've run out of things here, so I just go up here and I add another item. And down here I'm going to write add what I can. So e.g. in this problem we had to add 64 and 121 together to get an answer of 185. Alright, so I'm getting there now. I've got a couple of steps. Next one. Now I've said here that r squared is equal to 185. On my next line, I don't want to know what r squared is equal to, because that doesn't mean anything to me. I want to know what r is equal to. So I have to get rid of that squared. Now to get rid of that squared, I have to find the square root of it. When I do that, it cancels out that little squared up the top. So if I do it to this side, I've got to do it to this side. So I find the square root of 185, and then I end up with my answer. So for this step here, I need to, or in this question here, we've solved for r. So we can put in here, just so that we remember later on when we read it, make sure that we find the square root of r, which means we need to find the square root of the other side. I don't know if I like that one. I don't think. We didn't really find the square root of r, did we? We might get rid of that bit. So we can find the square root. Make sure that we find the square root of r squared. Thus find the square root of the right side of the equation. Cool. It doesn't really fit very well, does it? We'll come back and see if that works later on. I'll have to make it a bit shorter. And then, last thing, calculate our answer. Easy. So now we've got a really good list of what we had to do. I could give that to anybody else and they could do it. If I needed to change it, so if I look at that, is there anything that I need to swap around? Do I need to, can I put this one down here and bump that one up? Can I substitute A, B and C before I work it out? I can't really do that, can I? So we'll leave it up here. So I might just go back to this one and get rid of some of it so that we can actually read what it says. Oh, there it is. Solve for r. Make sure we find the square root of r squared, the right side. We'll just put the right side. You know what we're talking about. Now over here, you can explain what you've done. So I want you to write a little blurb that explains what you've done here to someone that's reading it. Because if someone just reads that, they're not really going to understand what you are doing. Now you need to do this process for worked example 2. Alright, to explain what they've done. And it's a little bit different because it's not working out the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is over here. Remember, it's opposite the right angle. So it's a little bit different to this one, but you have to use the same process to do that. Good luck. Oops, last thing we have to do is we're going to snip this so that once you've got your completed description in here, you could save it if you wanted to as a web page and other people can go and see it. You can put it into a blog and get a embed code. Example 1, I'm just going to really simply snip it. So use my snipping tool to snip. Hang on. I better write my name in. Okay, so my teacher wants me to submit it, and I'm going to snip it, and I'm going to paste it onto my OneNote. And later on, if I want to save it as a file, my teacher might want me to put it somewhere in particular. And there it is, sitting right next to there for you for later.